Fine, it's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Bill Maher says it's finally time to confront why Democratic strategy keeps stalling. Amid the ongoing ICE controversy, some expected the DNC's image to rebound. Instead, polling suggests continued turbulence. Maher claims he knows the real reason, and he argues it has less to do with Republicans and more to do with branding. If you want unfiltered political analysis, let's get into it.
Now, let me tell you about the story that liberal algorithms locked out. Her name is Sia Weaver, and if you ask anyone in the blue sky bubble who that is, they'll look at you like a turkey looking up at the rain. But she's kind of important in New York, being Major Mamdani's chief of the Office to Protect Tenants, and since Mamdani's big issue is the rent's too damn high, yes, he stole this guy's act. It's a very key appointment in the most important city in the country, which is also our financial center. It matters that the mayor stands by, and so I assume stands with, someone who says things like, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize private property, it's over. Seize private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more communists.
Maher begins by pointing to what he describes as the party's uncomfortable drift toward rhetoric that some voters interpret as far left. Critics argue that outspoken figures don't represent the entire Democratic coalition. But Maher says perception outweighs nuance in politics. When bold policy experiments emerge from places like New York City, a global symbol of finance and capitalism, the messaging doesn't stay local. It shapes national narratives.
Private property, especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. Really? Even among the 20 million black Americans who own their own home? I mean, these are the kind of utterances I might forgive as something a dumb white girl said while she was at Bryn Mawr. Because it's the kind of privilege hating you can only learn for $95,000 a year. But these are statements made as an adult. Yes, for co-eds from elite private colleges, you're only a lesbian until graduation, but the communism lasts a lifetime.
Maher argues that words like socialism and communism still carry political shock value in the United States. Fair or not, those labels trigger Cold War memories and fears of heavy government control for many voters. He says dismissing that reaction as ignorance is politically reckless. If Americans associate democratic messaging with centralized economic models they distrust, he warns the electoral consequences are predictable.
Democrats seem to be having this debate whether or not Mayor Mamdani is a socialist or a democratic socialist. Let me settle it. He's a straight-up communist. How do I know this? Well, I'm reading between the lines when one of his major advisors says, elect more communists.
He specifically questions how high-profile self-described democratic socialists impact the broader party image. While younger voters often lean progressive, Maher notes they're also pragmatic about jobs, inflation, and opportunity. If policies are perceived as economically risky, enthusiasm cools quickly. His warning is blunt: elevate figures seen as ideologically extreme, and opponents will define the entire party through that lens.
Fine, it's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country.
On Real Time with Bill Maher, Maher has openly criticized politicians like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for rhetoric he believes alienates moderates. Polling over the years has shown Americans generally view capitalism more favorably than socialism. Maher's point isn't academic, it's electoral. Labels matter, especially in swing states.
Turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Maher references Venezuela as a cautionary example often cited in debates about heavy state intervention. Once one of Latin America's wealthiest nations, Venezuela experienced severe economic contraction and instability over the past decade. Maher contrasts that with the U.S. economy, diversified, institutionally stable, and built on a market-driven framework. His argument: dramatic structural shifts carry real-world consequences.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
He also questions the Democratic Party's internal discipline. In Maher's view, when rhetoric drifts towards sweeping economic overhauls, party leadership is often slow to push back publicly. That silence, he argues, feeds the narrative that the party is comfortable with a sharper ideological turn, whether that's accurate or not. And in politics, perception can become reality.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism. But the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more.
Maher acknowledges that America already blends capitalism with social programs: public schools, Social Security, Medicare, infrastructure. The system isn't purely free market. But he draws a distinction between balance and overhaul. Expanding safety nets is one thing, restructuring the economic engine entirely is another. His concern centers on maintaining incentives, innovation, and fiscal stability.
Petrified of COVID, masking 2-year-olds who never would have died from it and keeping schools closed for far too long. They're definitely afraid of their kids, who from time immemorial have always come up with bad ideas. Their kids. Thinking up stupid shit is what they do. But parents used to tell them, that's ridiculous. The world doesn't work that way. Not today's parents. They say, you're right, honey. Gender is just a social construct. Please, sometimes your mother and I forget which one of us has.
He circles back to cultural politics. Maher argues that in recent elections, some voters felt alienated by messaging perceived as overly ideological. Instead of recalibrating, he fears certain factions may be doubling down. Elections, he says, are typically won in the center. If the party narrows its appeal instead of broadening it, it risks repeating past losses.
I don't know if we're still banning TikTok. That was before we changed the rule in America to Trump decides what's a law. But I know it wouldn't even be an issue if parents would sack up and tell their kids to get off the phone. Democrats are still afraid of the mean girls who police their far-out fringe. Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton had a perfect score on LGBTQ issues from the Human Rights Campaign. But when he said, I have 2 little girls, I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, his own campaign manager quit.
Maher's closing message is strategic, not ideological. Branding shapes outcomes. If voters feel uneasy about where a party stands economically or culturally, that perception can override policy details. America has historically balanced social programs with market capitalism. Tip that balance too far, or appear to, and moderates react. Adapt to the electorate, Maher warns, or risk learning the same lesson again at the ballot box.